What if I told you that the most dangerous entities in Star Wars history were never meant for the big screen? They weren't Sith Lords chasing political power or Jedi struggling with their faith. They were beings who could eat planets whole, bend reality to their will, and treat death as a minor inconvenience. These were the gods and monsters of the original expanded universe, a timeline so wild and untamed that when Disney took the reins, they had to wipe the slate clean. And let's be clear, this wasn't just a business decision, it was a move of narrative self-preservation. The implications of what these characters could do were fundamentally terrifying to the craft of storytelling itself. Today, we're diving deep into the 5 most overpowered beings erased from continuity and exploring why their insane abilities were simply too much for the new canon to handle. Forget everything you think you know about power in the Force. Forget Sidious and his fleet-destroying storms. Forget Yoda lifting an X-Wing. In the old Star Wars timeline, now called Legends, there were forces at play that made even the most powerful Jedi and Sith look like children playing with toys. We're talking about characters who could devour the life force of entire worlds, entities that existed outside the Force altogether, and a chaotic horror that was 12 times stronger than Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. These weren't just villains, they were cataclysmic events in the flesh, and their very existence threatened to unravel the fabric of storytelling itself. Before we dive into the cosmic horrors, we have to understand where they came from. For decades, the Star Wars universe grew far beyond George Lucas's 6 films. An interconnected web of novels, comics, and video games, known as the Expanded Universe, or EU, told stories spanning thousands of years. But without a central authority rigidly controlling every detail, the power levels began to escalate. Authors, trying to create the next big threat, kept upping the ante. What's more threatening than a Death Star, a Sith Lord who can consume planets with his mind? What's more dangerous than the Emperor? An immortal entity who has manipulated the galaxy for 1,500 years. This led to what fans call power creep, where characters became exponentially stronger just to present a credible threat. The Legends timeline became filled with world-breaking feats that, while awesome, created a significant barrier for newcomers. When Disney acquired Lucasfilm in 2012, they faced a choice: either try to navigate this dense, 35-year-old timeline, or start fresh. In 2014, they chose the latter. Lucasfilm rebranded the entire expanded universe as Legends, a collection of myths and stories that were no longer part of the official canon. But here's what's crucial. This allowed them to tell new stories, particularly the sequel trilogy, without being constrained by decades of pre-existing lore. It was a controversial move, but from a storytelling perspective, it allowed them to rein in the universe's power scale, grounding it back into a world where the stakes felt personal and comprehensible. In doing so, they had to leave behind some of the most terrifyingly powerful characters ever imagined. Our first legend is a perfect example of video game power fantasy made manifest. Galen Marek, codenamed Starkiller. The secret apprentice of Darth Vader, Starkiller was the protagonist of the 2008 game The Force Unleashed. The entire premise of the game was to give the player an experience of the Force that was, quite literally, unleashed. And it delivered. Starkiller's feats are the stuff of legend for a reason. As a mere child, when Vader came to kill his Jedi father, the boy reflexively ripped the lightsaber from Vader's hand with the Force. Impressed, Vader secretly trained him to be a living weapon. Trained through rage and brutality, Starkiller could send out telekinetic waves that obliterated armies of stormtroopers and fought multiple Jedi Masters who had survived Order 66. He even bested Darth Vader himself in a duel. But his most iconic feat, the one seared into the memory of every player, was pulling an entire Imperial Star Destroyer out of the sky using nothing but the Force. This single act places his raw telekinetic power on a scale rarely seen. Even Emperor Palpatine acknowledged that Starkiller's power could one day rival his own. So why was he left in Legends? Starkiller represents a fundamental problem for grounded storytelling. His power level is designed for a video game, where being overpowered is the point. In a narrative context, a character who can destroy armies and pull down capital ships with his mind makes conventional warfare obsolete. Why would the Rebel Alliance need a fleet when they could just have Starkiller? His existence breaks the stakes of the galactic conflict. He was a perfect avatar for a player, but a nightmare for a writer trying to maintain dramatic tension. If Starkiller represents the peak of individual combat power, our next legend represents the terror of immortality and manipulation on a galactic scale. Known by many names, Lord Vitiate, the Sith Emperor, and later Valkorion, this ancient being ruled for over 1,500 years. Born Tenebrae, he was a Sith pureblood of prodigious darkness. By age 10, he had already tortured and killed thousands. At 13, he was granted the title Lord Vitiate by the Dark Lord Marka Ragnos. But here's where it gets fascinating. Following the Sith Empire's defeat in the Great Hyperspace War, Vitiate orchestrated his masterwork of dark side sorcery. He lured over 8,000 of the most powerful remaining Sith Lords to his world of Nathema. There, he unleashed a 10-day ritual that drained the life essence from every living thing on the planet. The Sith, the plants, the animals, everything, and absorbed it into himself. The act left Nathema a silent void in the Force and granted Vitiate immortality. For the next millennium, he ruled the reconstituted Sith Empire and later a second, secret, eternal empire under the name Valkorion. His ultimate goal was to spark a massive galactic war to fuel a final ritual that would consume all life, transforming him into an all-powerful god. Vitiate could enslave minds by the billion, consume planets, and his consciousness could endure the destruction of his physical body. Like Starkiller, Vitiate's sheer scale is why he remains in legends. A character who can rule for 1,500 years and has a backup plan for his backup plan doesn't fit into a tightly plotted film trilogy. His threat is so existential, the consumption of the entire galaxy, that it overshadows more personal stories. Disney's canon has focused on more grounded threats, making Vitiate's brand of cosmic villainy incompatible. Some Sith seek power, others seek knowledge. But Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, sought only to consume. He is perhaps one of the most terrifying concepts from the Legends timeline. Not a man, but a walking wound in the Force. A survivor of a superweapon detonation on Malachor V, the immense trauma gave him a terrible gift, an insatiable hunger to drain the Force from living things. The more he fed, the stronger the hunger became. Eventually, it consumed his physical body entirely. To survive, Nihilus was forced to encase his spirit within his iconic mask and armor, becoming little more than primitive intent and an endless craving. Darth Nihilus's power was simple and absolute. He could drain the life force from an entire planet just to sate his hunger. He was responsible for the devastation of the Miraluka colony of Qatar, consuming the planet and a conclave of powerful Jedi from orbit. His language was incomprehensible, speaking in whispers that seemed to burn the ears of those who heard them. Nihilus's exclusion from the new canon is almost self-explanatory. How do you create stakes against a villain who can erase a planet's population as a mere snack? His power isn't just destructive, it's a fundamental aspect of his being that cannot be reasoned with. He was ultimately defeated by a Jedi exile who was also a wound in the Force. A tailor-made counter that highlights how difficult it would be to write him into any other story. His power is too absolute, too apocalyptic for the more nuanced conflicts of the current Star Wars canon. The characters we've discussed so far have all operated within the rules of the Force, albeit at the highest extremes. Our next entry operates outside of it entirely. The Bedlam Spirits were a group of 4 omnipotent, godlike entities with total control over space, time, and matter. Their behavior was often childish and chaotic. In one appearance, they encounter Princess Leia and a squad of stormtroopers. One spirit, Talatni, turns a stormtrooper into a diamond statue with a thought. They then smash and fuse 2 other troopers into a single, screaming mass. They even kill Leia, only to resurrect her moments later, seemingly for their own amusement. To them, creating and destroying life was trivially easy. They once threw 2 stormtroopers 8,000 years into the past for no reason at all. The Bedlam Spirits represent a level of power that transcends the Star Wars mythos as we know it. They are effectively all-powerful, their limits undefined, and their motivations alien. Their power to manipulate reality at will makes any conflict meaningless. Why worry about the Death Star when a being exists who could turn it into a flock of birds with a gesture? It's no surprise they remain a deep-cut piece of Legends lore. They are less of a character and more of a walking plot hole, utterly incompatible with a cohesive canon. We have finally arrived at the apex of Legends' power, a being so terrifyingly strong that Grandmaster Luke Skywalker himself considered her the most powerful foe he had ever faced. She is Abeloth, the bringer of chaos. Over 100,000 years before the films, Abeloth was a mortal woman who served a family of godlike force wielders known as the Ones. Fearing her own mortality, she drank from the font of power and bathed in the pool of knowledge. This act corrupted her, transforming her into a twisted, immortal entity of immense power and pure chaos. Abeloth's abilities are beyond comprehension. Even in a weakened state, she was stated to wield 12 times the force power of Legends Grandmaster Luke Skywalker, a character who himself could manipulate black holes. She could possess multiple bodies simultaneously across the galaxy, making her impossible to pin down. Her command of the Force allowed her to create mind-shattering illusions and unleash waves of energy that paralyzed powerful Jedi instantly. And here we find the ultimate reason a canon reset was necessary. Abeloth represents the absolute endpoint of power creep. When you have a villain who is a galaxy-level threat, who is essentially immortal, and who is an order of magnitude stronger than the most powerful hero, conventional storytelling breaks down. Her very existence raises the power ceiling of the universe to an astronomical height, making all other conflicts seem trivial. Disney's focus on more grounded heroes and villains stands in stark contrast to the Lovecraftian horror that is Abeloth. She was too powerful, too chaotic, and too reality-breaking to ever fit into the new Star Wars canon. These characters represent the wild, untamed frontier of the old expanded universe. While they may not fit into the current canon, their stories are still out there to be discovered. What do you think? Were these characters too overpowered, or do you wish they would make a return? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the lost history of Star Wars, be sure to subscribe for more lore dives. The erasure of these god-tier characters from the Star Wars canon wasn't an act of malice, but of narrative necessity. Galen Marek, Vitiate, Darth Nihilus, the Bedlam Spirits, and Abeloth were all born from a creative environment that prioritized escalation. This freedom inevitably led to a universe-threatening power creep that became unsustainable for a mainstream film franchise. A character who can pull down a Star Destroyer or eat a planet shifts the entire scale of conflict. Disney and Lucasfilm made a strategic choice to ground their new universe. They chose stories about scrappy rebels, conflicted heroes, and fallible villains. The threats in the new canon are technological, not metaphysical beings who can devour reality. It makes for a different kind of story, one that is perhaps more accessible. And while fans of Legends will always miss the epic scale of these characters, their exclusion was a deliberate move to protect the core themes of Star Wars. It's a universe where hope and individual choice matter, themes that can easily get lost when you introduce a character who is 12 times stronger than Luke Skywalker, or another who can unmake reality on a whim. These legends were not just characters, they were forces of nature, and sometimes even a galaxy far, far away isn't big enough for that kind of storm.